Imagine a world where AI doesn't just assist your projects, it anticipates risks, automates decisions, and turns chaos into clarity. Welcome to the future of project management. At Powering ProjeX, we champion the growth of project people, empowering every subscriber to lead with distinction, drive impactful outcomes, and turn vision into victory. Through sharp insights, inspiring stories, and energetic conversations, we will celebrate the exceptional people who transform industries and build a better world. Welcome to the Powering ProjeX podcast, where we explore the strategies, stories, and insights that make projects thrive. I'm your host, DK, and today we're exploring if and how AI might supercharge productivity, workflows, and decision-making in projects. But before we kick off, if you want to join a community that puts your career first, gain global connections, cutting-edge skills, and hear from voices just like yours who are shaping the project management industry, subscribe to the podcast now. And with no further ado, joining me today are four people I love doing business with and who are bringing their A game and diverse perspectives to this discussion table today. Welcome, Ryan Chaffey. Ryan is an accomplished leader with extensive experience in enterprise-wide transformation, governance, and project portfolio management across utilities, technology, and the telco sector. Welcome, David Myall. David is a general manager whose role encompasses strategic and operational leadership in the software and IT consulting industries. With a keen focus on strategic and financial management, David thrives on empowering clients through actionable insights, digital transformation, generative AI, and automation solutions. Welcome, Andrew MacNeill. A veteran software developer and business analyst, he is also the author of Towards Consciousness, a thought-provoking exploration of AI and consciousness, and the architect behind AON, Artificial Intelligence Orchestration Network, a modular framework for AI-driven project and operations management. Welcome, Luke Belfield. Luke is an accomplished infrastructure executive. He has significant skills in major infrastructure planning, categorized by meticulous project management and problem-solving capability within high-risk or sensitive environments. Most recently, Luke was also Victoria's Chief Engineer, where he led the whole-of-government digital transformation program and is now the principal in an infrastructure-focused consultancy. So let's jump right in. The problem statement for today. In today's fast-paced project environments, teams are drowning in deadlines, meetings, voices, and data noise, endless reports, obligations, regulations, policies, and dashboards. And much of the communication is siloed, which hinders timely decisions and buries early issue detection. Which leads me to our topic for today. How can and will AI enhance productivity and improve project outcomes? Think task prioritization, scheduling, and communications all aligned into key, neat packages with clear messages, options, risks, and decisions clearly laid out for consideration at the right time. Today, we'll be debating integrating AI into daily workflows and shifting to AI-driven decision-making, where expectations across portfolios are flagged, risks assessed via probability scenarios, and noise reduced for focused, high-quality analysis. No more static reports, just AI assessing data, suggesting alternative options, and guiding where to focus our valuable time. But first, our hot takes for this week. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
So I'm really liking Google Notebook LLM. So I guess for me, the real use case for projects is to turn boring status reports, RAID logs, and project documentation into a podcast style interview. I think it's going to be a great way for project managers and project leaders to communicate project information in informative ways that sponsors will actually listen to. One of the kind of limitations with that kind of podcast style is making sure that the AI voices focus on the right things, and it does require a lot of careful prompting, but I think it's going to be a really powerful tool to help project managers communicate better.
Thanks for that. David, what about yourself?
Sure. Well, given that we're still early in the AI journey, I'm not quite ready to hand over the reins just yet. So I'm all about taking away the low value tasks. So, I'm very similar to what Brian was saying. And to your point about some of the noise around reporting, dashboard, regulatory compliance, getting rid of some of that using agentic AI, I think is a really good place to start. And beyond the immediate impact of that, it drives a culture of automation, which I'm also a bit of a fan of. So, one of the pitfalls with that is organizations, they need to get budget and sign off for everything, project review board, etc. So, one of the pitfalls is looking at each of those automations or each of those agents with specific AI for the agent. You really need to look at it at a portfolio level sometimes. So, if you're going to automate the reporting for a PM, you need to do all the reports. You can't just say, this one's got a really low ROI, so we'll leave that as manual. That's not going to work for you in the long run. So occasionally you need to do something that may not have great ROI by itself, but as part of a portfolio makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Good thoughts. And Andrew, what about yourself?
Well, one of the things that I've been really excited about in more tools that are coming in is keeping the history. When they actually keep history of your previous conversations. Previously, what you would do is you would grab to your old chat, you'd pull it down, and your chat may have had 500 pieces of a conversation that you had with GPT or with Claude. And you always have to have that because it can't remember context. And the fact that they're now starting to remember context, my chat GPT has already reached its limit of memory. I'm sure most people who have turned memory on in ChatGPT have, but being able to have a conversation with it where it remembers certain parts of your previous conversations becomes huge. And Ryan, I was thinking immediately when you're talking about the LLM being able to use for creating podcasts and going back to a previous one, having that history is so important. The one thing that kills me every time you look at different tools to do it, because Google comes out with a tool, then OpenAI comes out with a tool, is that everybody's throwing AI on top of everything, and they think it's going to solve the problem, and it ends up being just one more thing that people have to learn how to use. And as soon as you do that, you've kind of removed the benefit of it, because nobody wants to spend time learning yet another tool that's going to improve maybe 5% of the job, or as you were talking about, David, about being able to do one little manual report as opposed to doing all of them. You need to have one tool, or at least a series of tools that you don't have to configure every time to get it right. So that's the one thing that always sets me back a little bit from all of the excitement of new stuff that's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. All really, really valid points. This week I've been finishing reading Agentic Artificial Intelligence, which is harnessing AI agents to reinvent business, work, and life. And they ran some really interesting studies on how to ensure good workflows and handoffs between AIs. So they talked about all of their history producing agentic AIs for different organizations. And what I found really interesting was that we can't use one agent AI for all things, that they don't like that massive amount of complexity as much as we humans don't like it, which I found really interesting. And hence, building those AIs and that learn and improve, they really recommended that you build one AI for disparate domains and tasks and allow them to become much, much smarter in a very distinct area. And they also talked about how to structure AIs. So if you were planning to use multiple agentic AIs across the organization for different tasks and task automation, how you actually structure them with coordination AIs as well as your worker AIs. It's helped me understand in my mind how I would evolve sort of that kind of army of AI agents and how they all link together to create those perfect workflows with perfect handoffs. Much like humans, One of the things you find in project management when you've done it as many times as I have is how many things fall between the cracks in those grey areas of, was that my responsibility? Were you handing that off to me? Really? I didn't know that was my job. And AI and agentic AI is exactly the same. There has to be a lot of clarity when we're handing off from one to another. What are you guys' thoughts?
You're exactly right. I think that orchestration is a key part of it that's still fairly immature. There are some RPA tools. As an enterprise sort of software systems guy, to me, it's very much like microservice architecture rather than having a very large, monolithic sort of service. You have, many, many small services that can then, or agents in this case, that can then, route to different directions depending on the use case. But yeah, I think that orchestration, whilst there are tools that are, trying very hard at that, and there are some RPA tools that claim to be very good at that using agentic AI, I think we're still fairly immature in that space, but absolutely think that's a key to unlocking the value.
Right. It's kind of like having a person that is the expert in the one field that's able to deal with those things. The challenge I always see with that is they may be the expert in the one thing, and then somebody else is the expert in the other thing. And this is with people as well as with this. And so when something goes wrong, the fingers get pointed everywhere. And so, Danielle, your example of something slipped between the cracks, who is supposed to deal with that? And that's where, coming back to my earlier point, this is where having the agents are important, but also having that level of history, or at least having them be aware of the full context of a project or that level of detail within an organization is just as critical, especially as David, you were mentioning all of these various tools that are there. Who's going to get to configure them all? The IT department must be putting up their hands going, yes, we're never going to have a problem having a job.
Yeah. Do you know what I found interesting as well? And Andrew, you'll appreciate this. I caught up with Paul Boudreau, Professor Paul Boudreau from, is he from Ottawa University?
Yes, Algonquin University, but in Ottawa, Algonquin. Yes.
Okay. And he was actually saying, we were talking through, how these will get built out. And he's of the opinion now that individual project managers will build their own agent AIs for what they are working through specifically, that it will not be this IT-led environment, enterprise infrastructure the way it has been before. And I found that quite interesting.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think at the individual aspect of the project manager will have it. It's just a matter of depending on what tool they end up using. Yes, you're gonna build your own agent that's going to do the job that you need it to do. But if all of these agents are coming from different sources, then you're going to get so much different information. And it's almost kind of like if everybody started to use their own spreadsheet to do something, it's all over the place.
All the time.
Right. Sorry, Ryan, I jumped in over you.
I actually think that the HR function of the future will play a role in onboarding agents into an organization. And I think a lot of the way that those agents will communicate in an organization will be enabled through protocols like the model context protocol, which will allow individual agents to communicate and align across the organization. I think, it's going to be really important also the sensitivity around data and how those agents will share information too, because, if I'm bringing an agent into an organization, how is that agent going to be vetted from a security and data privacy perspective?
Look, I love that, Ron. Going back to what Andrew said around, the proliferation of spreadsheets that we always see in organizations, I am worried about everyone creating their own agents and the duplication and the lack of conformity and such around that. So, the idea of HR or some other sort of governance layer having a look over that, I think that's a fantastic idea. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. That's a whole new skill set for our HR team.
I guess my hot take the week is really around the how an AI-powered predictive project and analytics platforms are working. So we're seeing a lot in the major construction space where we've got products like or platforms like Endplan or Often AI, and they can scan vast amounts of historical schedule or cost data. also live project updates, weather forecasts, and supplier performance records. Predict where delays or cost overruns are most likely to occur. That's humongous when you think about, government projects. Most are going over budget over time. So that's a really great tool to help manage that. And I'd say that these tools don't just flag the problem, they can model multiple mitigation scenarios, rank them by probability of success, and present clear decision pathways. That's a huge leap from traditional static reporting to truly proactive project controls. And through this, there's always that over-reliance on AI outputs without that sort of critical human oversight. But if the underlying data is incomplete, biased, or poorly integrated as well, the AI could confidently recommend the wrong course of action. Always treated like an intern, right? In high-stakes projects, that false sense of certainty can be riskier than having no eye at all. And people may stop challenging the assumptions behind the recommendations, but that risk is always there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Do you know, Luke, though, have you actually been involved in any organisations that have used NPlan or Octant and have they released any
Yeah.
case studies?
I'm not sure if, when I was working in government, the sort of case studies
Yes.
were more internal case
Yes.
studies rather than public facing. So I'd say that there were those case studies because where I was in government was central agency. So we're trying to get projects in departments to change slightly what they're doing and, challenge what they're doing. So there was more of how do we pitch to them to go, this is a safe tool to use and it's actually going to improve your lives. So there were those internal case
No.
studies, but I'm not sure that they
And
were
once
external.
again, this is exactly the conversation I was having with Paul Boudreau, because I said, where are all these case studies? I'm sure I know that NPlan and Octant are doing amazing work for so many clients, and yet nothing gets released. And he said, well, why would they, Daniela? Because if you have a commercial advantage as a result of using this technology, why would you share that with others? And I started to realize
Well, the other
this is
aspect
really
of that,
going to give people.
right? The other side of that is also the flip side. If you do have that product out there and you do a case study and it didn't really quite hit the mark, do you really want to go out and promote how well
Yeah.
or how badly it didn't hit the mark? And yes, as a project manager or as a company, you can always find a way of spinning it. But the end reliant, if you go to the company afterwards, after they've done the work on it, and they said, yeah, it didn't really quite work out the way we wanted to. And I've been involved in a lot of AI test environments where, yeah, it should be able to do this absolutely perfectly. And then they have to step back and go at the end, it's not worth doing it. It's just isn't at that
Right.
level yet. And it comes into that also that human oversight that almost needs to happen. And so if you're doing human oversight and AI, at some point in time you have to decide where the benefit is.
And there's another factor as well that government will be reluctant to promote one sort of tool or company over another. And also they don't want to put anything out there that someone may misinterpret and then rely upon. Last thing you want is someone using a tool and saying, well, government said it was great. Government, it's your responsibility because it didn't quite work for me. I just spent a whole lot of money.
I saw an MIT report in the last 24 hours that said that 95% of generative AI project pilots at companies are failing. So I guess the actual experimentation and the use cases mightn't necessarily getting the outcomes. It'd be interesting. I'd be able to share that link, actually. It's a really interesting article.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
But I suppose...
I think one of the key, sorry, if I can just interject quickly, I think one of the key things that I just sort of thought about with Andrew's statement was around the technology getting better. We tried to do a project about a little over a year ago, and failed fairly spectacularly. We just found it to be really technically difficult. And we tried that again. I tried that again. I just thought I'd have a little play around with it again with a different tool set and an updated tool set about 3 months ago, and it was ridiculously easy. So, the tool sets are coming along so quickly that just because something failed 6 months ago doesn't necessarily mean it's going to fail again, right? So that failure, you can't just go, oh, that's bad luck, we're done.
We'll never do this again. Yeah.
You need to come back and revisit that if there is value in it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really a key learning from AI at the moment, is that because it didn't work 6 months ago, doesn't mean it's going to work now. But equally, it also means that whatever you build now may not be the best way to build it in another 6 months or so. So
Correct.
you just be a little bit careful. So
Yeah.
there's the upside and the downside there. But yeah, just because something failed 6 months ago doesn't mean that you can't do it now or in another 3 or 6, 12 months, whatever the case may be.
I
But
can
will a
actually say
government
that
take
for
a
most of
will
the
a government
projects.
take that approach?
Mm.
That's the issue, right? Will
Yeah.
government say, oh well, it didn't work 6 months ago, let's give it another shot? All of the private companies
Yeah.
can say, yeah, we'll give it another shot, but governments I can see being a little bit more gun shy after the first failure.
Yeah. But I could say that for most of the
Yeah.
projects in my history. They have been tried at some point in the past, and someone's decided, okay, we're going to give it another go. And I think timing says a lot. Technology, timing, maturity of the team, understanding. I've been on projects before where we didn't have enough knowledge and capability of that technology domain at the time when we were doing it, but it doesn't mean we won't have that knowledge at some point in the future and to make it more
Yeah.
successful. So, there is definitely some wisdom in trying again and see how you go. So today we're debating integrating AI into daily workflows. No more static reports, just AI assessing data, suggesting alternative options, and guiding where to focus our valuable time. So Ryan, we're going to start with you on today's debate.
So, as you know, Daniela, projects, programs, and portfolios traditionally have drowned in a lot of repetitive work, status collation, action chasing, data reconciliation. And I guess one thing I've observed is AI agents really excel at this kind of housekeeping. You mentioned that monitoring in real time, helping stitch the picture together, and helping surface the decisions that matter. And I guess it's going to cut down latency and shrink the noise. I would say in the future with AI agents and decision-making tools that forecasts will improve because, these forecast updates will happen continuously. Consistency and auditability are going to go up. Every recommendation made by an agent comes with sources and rationale. And I guess the real win for project managers is time returned. And that time return can be invested into stakeholder management, negotiation, and judgment. I guess the future with agents means exception-based governance. Leaders are able to see the outliers and not getting, to your point, Daniela, getting snowed under with dashboards. I don't think agents are going to replace project managers. I guess they raise the bar and raise the floor so everyone can raise the ceiling in terms of their value judgment on projects. And I guess from a governance perspective, agents allow clear guardrails and human in-the-loop controls. So we are able to get speed without losing accountability. I think that agentic workflows are going to reshape project, program, and portfolio management. Automating the routine creates space for the human element, critical thinking, empathy, judgment, and storytelling. So, the meetings become shorter, decisions faster, and progress more predictable.
Great response, Ryan. I loved it. Well done. All right, so we will move straight on to David. David, your thoughts?
Sure. So, big fan of agentic AI, but the key for me there is the word agent. And I liken that to the use of travel agents or real estate agents. They're not making the decisions for us, they're guiding us and using their expert knowledge to sort of help us make those decisions. So, I think that's a key thing. Also, human in the loop, massive fan, not ready to give that up yet. And also, a big fan of, just freeing up times to use their specific knowledge. Project managers have decades often of experience in this, but they are bogged down with some of the non-value add tasks. So I think that's, I think that's really, really, really important that we keep that going. I think I think about an old story actually that was more around Internet of Things, IoT, that we used to tell at IBM, which is around heavy vehicle operations. So someone out on a mine, out back Western Australia, driving one of those great big tipper trucks, could get a call from someone in the US saying that they've got a bearing running hot and they need to stop their truck immediately. And that would obviously cut any further damage to that truck, and therefore cut the cost of repair and that type of thing. It wouldn't be difficult to apply that sort of method to project management as well. Just like, whoa, stop doing this right now. And again, from an agile point of view, that's something that we do every sprint. What went well, what didn't do well, what are we never going to do again? So it's really, I think that's somewhere that AI, not so much the agentic, but more the the deep knowledge AI could really help with projects as well. So I think the marriage of the agentic, but also the sort of deep analysis AI will definitely add value. Absolutely agree that project managers won't be going anywhere on projects that I'm involved in for a very, very long time.
Classic. Andrew, I think you are up next. What are your thoughts?
Well, I wanted to almost combine with what Ryan and David were talking about, because as soon as I listened to part of those comments, my concern is, have you not seen what some of the responses are that come out of these LLMs today? You don't want those to be used at all. And so, yes, the agentic AI or any of the agents that come out are very valuable. But I think, Ryan, you were mentioning how it's giving the suggestion, it's giving the recommendation. And I think that ends up being the most critical part. But from a human perspective, we look at it and go, okay, well, now it's giving us the response. This is the recommended response. I'm just going to hit send. And I think that becomes the other danger that gets into it, because again, it doesn't have the deep knowledge. I think, David, that what you were referring to, the deep knowledge of everything that's going on. And so people get into that habit of saying, yep, that's the right word. I'm going to use it, as though you were using a spell check. And when you're making bigger decisions from an agent and you're letting the agent make those decisions, that I think is where people need to be a little bit more cautious. I mean, I'm all gung-ho on letting the agents do a lot of the things that need to be done that basically take the time out of project management. But a lot of those things can already be done in other tools. You have a timesheet system, it'll send a reminder to everybody asking them to make sure you filed your spreadsheet, make sure you filed your timesheet this week. A lot of these tools already exist, but a lot of the companies are just smacking the word AI on top of them to make it sound a little bit more fresh and a little bit more exciting. And
It's a bit like greenwashing, isn't it? It's like AI washing now. I'm just going to add AI to everything. It's true.
Yeah.
Sorry, keep going, Andrew.
No, it is very true. But you still need to have it, especially at this stage. When people talk about wanting to have agents do a lot of things, you need to have at least that test rollout process going through. And we have a client of ours who does grant approvals. And when they do grant approvals, they go through a 10-step process of checking to make sure all of the things are filled in from people. Well, you don't want the AI necessarily to go through and say, yep, approve it, stamp the approval on it, but you do want it to raise those red flags. I think when you were mentioning the exception-based process, and that's the key thing where it comes into it. But again, recognize that if you've had well, I'm sure everybody here has had a conversation with an LLM where it comes back and it says, the next word out of it says, oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you wanted. And I don't think you really want that if you've given the agent AI the ability to hire and fire people or do something major in your project.
Correct. Luke, I think you are up next.
So when I think about the novel use case for AI agents, it's probably in those repetitive tasks. I think the most exciting, and we'll sort of talk about it, is that where there's that opportunity to operate continuously in the background and monitoring live data, spotting anomalies, and taking that first pass at any analysis or even drafting recommendation before a human even asks. And I know in the projects world, there's huge amount of reporting and analysis that goes in for just managing project. But for some of those mega projects, you can get reports on reports on reports. Everyone needs a different type of report and focus, and you can end up with thousands of pages of reporting that humans generate, unless they're great value, but that different reporting for different purposes. You can sort of set up an agent to at least do a first draft of all that reporting. Would massively be a time saver. Or you could set it up to do the sort of an AI agent dedicated, and this would be great for contract risk management. So scanning thousands of clauses, because some of these project agreements are into the hundreds of pages long, seriously big tombs of instructions, or correspondence or progressive daily data to detect potential breaches or claims conditions before they escalate. Another could handle stakeholder sentiment tracking. So really big, you've got a project in the sort of the public domain, and you're touching lots of different stakeholders. So you can be in touch with all the different social media. I mean, how many Facebook friends groups of that sort of project managers need to jump on straight away before it escalates into a bigger problem. So you can have an agent, checking that and making sure that it's contained. Another one would be pulling signals from meeting notes, email summaries. I think it goes beyond just that automation. You're setting rules, a bit like when you're taught coding, sort of an engineering or software degree. It's setting up those rules and conditions and boundaries and exception use cases. I think it's the craft of having a well-defined boundary that doesn't have too many errors. But then that's where humans come in and need to be that sort of error checking and have that critical thought. And the agent can be great at not waiting for a query to happen. It sort of recognizes patterns, proposes actions, and packages decision-ready insights, so sort of enabling humans to focus on judgment and strategy rather than.
But isn't there a
powering through the
concern that you're
data.
going to get to that point where you're just letting the AI make the decision? I know we're talking about how they're going to send a message and somebody's going to oversee it and see what it is, but eventually you get to the point where you're rubber stamping it. There are two different approaches, right? One is you let the agent do everything, or the other approach is that people start getting emails from these agents.
Yeah.
They recognize who it's from, and they just immediately just mark them as read and just throw them away in their in basket.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. I guess it's about what the value of that judgment comes in. So if they're providing real value, then people might read it. If it's just another junk email, then I guess they're not going to read it. But I guess there's tendencies for companies to, move towards lowest costs. And if an agent is doing the work of a human, even if it comes up with a lot more errors, then they're probably just going to go with basic. I mean, that happens in sort of an engineering sense in the oil and gas industry in Australia, where, pre-GFC, we're doing a whole of engineering design in Australia, and then they were trying to find ways to make costs cheaper, and then all the engineering went to Southeast Asia at a quarter of the cost. And even though the client would say they'll make more errors, but it's a quarter of the cost, so we'll make it up.
But I think also, those of us who've done project management for software would have inevitably heard but it works on my machine, excuse when we're going to, and I just, that's a no-no. So I think, I've made it very clear to project managers in my realm that, AI said it would be fine is the equivalent of it works on my machine, right?
Yeah.
It's just not okay at all, right? They don't come to me and say, oh, well, we're, 30% over budget, but the AI said it was going to be fine. I don't know what went wrong. That is not acceptable. So, the delivery professionals, they're responsible for the delivery, and therefore they're responsible for the tools and methods they use to, to manage their projects, right? I think that's absolutely critical.
If these AI agents speed up decision making, I can understand people just the sheer overload of AI agents, information and decisions. And that's where humans inevitably going to get lazy and go, well, I know that these agents, probably only hallucinate 5% of the time. I'm just going to take the risk and accept that what the agent says is correct. And that's
Yeah.
the decision fatigue humans deal with all the time. And if an agent's going to speed it up, I go, well, I'm going to take the risk, right? I'm going to let these agents make the decision. And it's a big problem.
I don't know that we're anywhere near decision-making support with AI at this point in time. But the one thing I do see the potential for is, like with dashboarding today, marketing has a dashboard, the CEO has a dashboard, legal has a dashboard, everybody has a dashboard. If I have 16 disciplines in project management, I have an AI agent supporting me with each of those key areas.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing about project management is it is not a hierarchy, it is actually a cube. All of these different disciplines lock in together and they impact one another on a regular basis. So if I have stakeholder changes, I'll have scope changes, which means I have risk changes, which means I have potential issue changes, which means I have requirements changes, and then I have cost changes and time changes. They all lock in together. So the issue then becomes, if I have multiple agents making or supporting me with decision making and analysis, if they start to diverge in their perspectives, what do I do? Once again, I'm back in the dashboarding scenario, which is I've got two agents telling me different things, and it'll become difficult.
Right. And the challenge with the dashboard, I think, is people build the dashboard, and the person that gets right into wanting this particular dashboard says, and when this problem occurs, I want you to highlight it in green, or I want you to highlight it in red. And that's great for a dashboard when you're looking at it. But what do you want the agent to do? You want the agent to say, when it hits red or when it hits green, I need you to email Ryan and tell him to fix this problem, or tell David that he needs to work on something else. But again, if those decisions, then basically all you've really done is turned like an email tracker on, which you can have you can already have that functionality in your BI reporting tools. So really is a matter of, I think, of finding the right value of what the agent will do for you. And so it is a trade-off. Do you want the human to make the final decision or on the recommendation? Yes. But you also, I think, need to have that second the second person looking over your shoulder. In this case, it's an AI that's looking over your shoulder, just to say, wait 1 second. Here's the thing that you need to be aware of.
And that's what I love about AI, really, to be honest, is the fact that I can lead, but I have someone over my shoulder that is providing guidance and additional context or additional, thought processes where, because as a human, I don't have the mental bandwidth to consider everything and every single element of detail. It's just too difficult for my mind to build patterns over all of it, and nor can I even ingest that volume of data to make good quality decisions all the time. And I think that's where the sweet spot is between the two. Does that make sense?
But it also depends on industry, right? So if you're in government, that may work, right? Okay, this would be a better outcome for society. It's like, I never even thought of that. That's a great idea. Me in consulting, unfortunately, I have to do what the customer wants. We've all been in a million projects where it's like, really don't like the idea of that. Wouldn't be going down that path. Well, here's a great big check. Please go and do it. Okay, right? So, it does depend. I guess same with the building industry, right? They might say, we'll build this, marvelous architectural masterpiece, but it's going to cost billions of dollars, and etc. Right? So I think it does depend on industry as well. So, but good to have those. Definitely good to have that sort of input. Because, obviously there's always things that we don't think of.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else?
Well, David, I want to jump back to one of the things that you were talking about earlier on with the Internet of Things. How much is that still being used? That approach is still being used. Back when you're saying somebody's driving a tractor out and they're getting the call back from North America. Now with an AI type of thing, it's not necessarily going to be, it's going to be in a data center that's somewhere. But that knowledge base or that information can actually be being run somewhere local, because this is a perfect opportunity for an agent AI to pick up on it. But has there really been that huge turnaround, or that, I guess, that boost of productivity with that functionality that you were describing?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you. From my point of view, that's sort of machine learning coming, moving into the AI world, so it is a bit of that sort of AI wash that we were talking about before. They'd call that AI now, but, that's one of those things we've been doing since the 60s that was really just machine learning and such, right? So, but now they would call it AI, but, it's certainly still occurring. There's this really great sort of case study from, I think it's Water New South Wales, or maybe Sydney Water, around platypus protection, and they're using cameras and AI to understand, where platypus are nesting and making sure it's not near intake pipes and things like that, right? So there's some really good use cases. There's another one around rhinoceros recognition, so using a facial recognition AI algorithm for rhinoceros to track the movement of rhinoceros, in
In
and
the wild.
around, in parks that are, making sure they're not moving out of the areas where they're,
Meant to
protected
be.
by rangers and such, right?
That's
So,
very digital
um,
ID, isn't it?
it is,
Are
yeah,
they going to get a
very much
social
so.
credit score too?
You couldn't put an air tag
Yeah.
on them?
Yeah.
Don't know how many
So,
people walking around with iPhones there are.
Yeah, really. But it does take the whole
Sorry.
banding. It does take the whole banding thing to a brand new level from from back when people used to band the birds or put little bands on things so they can identify them. It takes it to a whole new level now, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they don't need to band it. They can have a digital representation of it and follow it using AI
yeah.
to track it, vision-based AI. But I just say with the IoT, I mean, it has been around since the 60s, and I think it really comes down to the capability and understanding of use. So I'd say that process industry and water industry, like they're really good at using IoT.
Mm.
They've been using it for a very long time, and they connect it with SCADA systems and things like that. So you can fully automate remote sites. I remember one of my first projects as getting into the water sector was to automate 150 remote sites after there'd been a massive bushfire in Canberra, and just to be able to manage your network more efficiently and also make sure that you're not having people going out and operating those sites manually. Huge efficiency dividend there.
Very good. Anything else from anybody else before we move on to the next section? Well, not very often you're silent. It's a good thing. All right, we're going to move on to the AI News Roundup segment for today, and we're just going to talk about what's a buzz and what I've seen on social media predominantly over the past couple of weeks. So, number one was Bindi Reddy, the CEO of the AI super assistant Deep Agent, claims that predictions show that 90% of enterprise apps using AI by the end of the year, with agents automating 15 to 50% of knowledge-based work. What do people think?
Is that 90% will fail, or is that 90% will succeed?
No, so
Or
predictions. So yeah, 90% of enterprise app will be using AI by year end.
and how many of
End
them
of
will continue to be
2025.
using it 3 months after? That would be my immediate.
Yeah, or using it well and adding value to their business.
Yeah, this is very true.
Look, I've been around a while, and I remember at high school, computers were going to take our jobs. I grew up in an era where to do research, I had to go to a library, and then the internet was going to take our jobs, and now AI is going to take our jobs. We're all employed. I think there is a social impact that needs to be considered here, most definitely. Obviously we've just seen a certain large company, I won't mention in case I end up working for them at one point, that has just announced record earnings and laid off 10 to 14,000 people in sort of the same breath, so to speak. That's an interesting look for organisations that's to be doing that. But I tend to think that more broadly, AI is more of an internet type solution. It'll just become ubiquitous within everything that we do, right? And therefore help everything we do, like the study example, right? I used to have to get on the tram or the bus and go to the library to do my study. Then the internet came along and I could sit at home and do that. So it didn't stop study, or it just changed the way it was done and made it more efficient. So personally think that more broadly, that AI is going to do more of that. And of course, like with computers and like with internet, jobs will change. But the overall number of them, I think, we always find a way to balance that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a great piece coming up in just a moment that sort of brings a lot of this to life. But moving on, what we also found, taken from a recent research report from AI Multiply, called the IT Automation Trends. So they were highlighting AI and machine learning integration is exploding, with 90% of enterprise apps incorporating AI by the end of the year, which is what we just talked about. Generative AI is a hot focus, with 97% of businesses building models for API integrations. Agentic AI is emerging strongly, set to handle 15% of the tasks, and that's decision making autonomously by 2028, which is interesting. Intelligent document processing is key for handling unstructured data via NLP and OCR. Self-service automation is adopted by 88% of organizations, and DevOps and AI ops, which is a new one, trends are reducing downtime by 20% and boosting output by 50%. So what are your thoughts on those?
Well, if they can reduce the downtime, that'd be great. We just went through a scenario where we had to rely on 3 government groups to put a server up that was in production, and it took them 4 days. So if they can do it, absolutely. I'm all on board with that.
Anyone else?
I've seen an amazing demo of a tool that was using observability software. Got an alert from observability software around infrastructure. It created its own ticket in a ServiceNow type of tool. It went in and did what it needed to do with the computer, restart a service or whatever it was. It was a fairly minor thing. Then it went back and sort of closed the ticket, and everything was fine, right? So, that's a fantastic example of sort of, that sort of AI ops type of scenario. And again, the reducing downtime. So, rather than getting a human to do that, or that snowballing into other services going down, the server going down, there's actually an agent. And this is, I guess, going back to something we mentioned earlier, this is a series of different agents. There's a separate agent to, that was looking at the observability data, then creating the ticket, then actually doing something in the server itself. So a number of different agents sort of chained together, to make sure that server stayed up. So, that's definitely, I think, a great deal of value there. I think the intelligent document processing is absolutely critical. I use it all the time to summarize. I'm sure most of us do, right? You get an 80-page something or other contract or something like that. It's like, give me the key
themes.
Yeah. Or, anything for specific terms. I remember, recently looking for a specific sort of clause in a contract type thing. So that's absolutely going to save us a lot of time for sure.
What's interesting about that comment, though, about the using it for summarizing documents, and I was just thinking about how we were talking about AI washing, about everything on there. Word has had an auto document summary feature for over 15 years. And people used to use it and they used to laugh at how bad it was. And now it's gotten and now with AI, it's so much better. So I can only imagine what we're going to say with some of those some of those summaries that are coming out. At one point in time, I'm sure if somebody looked at what the very first version of ChatGPT for summarizing a document did compared to what it does now, it'll be a huge difference.
Yeah. But when we used to build bespoke software or even implement off-the-shelf software for different clients, we would always talk about the fact that really 80% of people will only use 20% of the capability. Like they really won't venture much further than that. And that's sort of a classic example, if it has had that capability for so long. But until we AI washed it, It wasn't so cool, was it? Do you know another thing I'm finding really interesting about these stats is I don't feel like there's anything new there. Even, when I look at self-service, the concept of self-service has been around for a long time. Lots of organizations have wanted to move to different, self-service capability across the organization. So I don't know. I don't know that there's anything here that feels different.
But I think there's a huge benefit here for that hasn't been spoken about with AI. Companies own and government own vast amounts of IP that's just sitting in a document repository somewhere.
Could be mined.
And, a lot of that work that they do in those repositories is
Yes.
done
Yes.
again and repeatedly
Yes.
done it all over again. You put an AI
Correct.
over the top of that, and it's
Correct.
able to bring all that data out, and suddenly you've got the ability to be a lot more competitive and use a lot more of that data for benefit for a company.
As I say all the time, I think one of the biggest failings of our entire industry is our inability to learn from the mistakes of the past.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was it was all buried in documents that no one ever goes back to reread. And we did not ever master how to create databases of knowledge out of all of that historical data. And also, we are so impatient to start projects that we don't go back and do the homework that we need to do to say, why did we fail at this previously? And what can I learn from that before I try again? These issues is where I truly hope that AI, and not necessarily decision making, even though I love the idea of decision making support, but I truly believe if we can just harness the learnings of the past, we will actually be able to move forward with this industry. Because if you look at our historical statistics, the reality is project management and delivery success rates have not improved. They are not improving. They are not moving forward. And it was funny. I was doing some work for Andrew in the last few days, and I was really thinking about how do I apply this to many projects in a voluminous environment. And all I could think to myself is, I met a PM recently who had not even put half of the project documents into the project repository. They were sitting on his desktop. Yeah. And I thought, how do we ever create sanity out of this mess if people cannot even save their documents using a right naming convention? So you actually know that that is the design, and then that was the approved version of the design, not a draft from 3 months ago. If we don't get those basic elements right, how do we ever move forward?
But then AI should solve that problem. Go ahead, David. Sorry.
Hopefully, Andrew.
Yeah, just another follow-up on what Luke said. We've been talking about, we've also percent of AI projects are failing or not getting the ROI that was expected at the very minimum. When I'm talking to customers about what they're doing with AI, they've got these massive ideas. They're trying to do the rocket surgery type thing and what else have you. But putting an NLP engine over a knowledge base,
yes,
there's your ROI. And I was talking to a health providers, an organisation that owns hospitals and such, and they did that, for nurses more around the admin type of stuff. How do I apply for leave in this site and that type of thing. And the ROI on that was enormous, and it literally takes minutes. If you've got a SharePoint site or some other document management site, there's a lot of agents that you can just point at that site. You don't want to give it access to the whole library. You do want to, back to your point about data, Daniela, you do want to contain that to certain specific areas. But, here's your HR type NLP engine, here's your finance, here's your expenses type thing. So you do want to contain that. If you just give it carte blanche to a massive document management system, you're going to get junk back. If you can, if you can tailor that a little bit, whereas everyone's trying to do these, fantastically massive things that are bound to fail. Whereas you could literally do something like that in a number of days.
Yeah, start with
what a huge opportunity, though, for combining with what, Luke, you were talking about with that whole IP database that the government has, all of those document repositories, and what you're getting at, David. If you think about how LLMs are trained, they're trained on these massive subsets of data. But all of this data is not the data that project managers need. or that government agencies need, because it's all on publicly available data. But if you all of a sudden were able to take that data that you've got stored, whether it be learning how as you were talking about, David, like how to take leave, any of the manuals that are in the documentation that's already in place, or in Luke, your example of all of the history of information that's in there. If you then converse, not even just with NLP, but similar to how you converse right now with an LLM, that is incredible ROI. It's just a matter then of one of the businesses allowing you to take your data set and making it your training data set there within the LLM for you to be able to take advantage of, which I don't think is going to be that far away.
No, it's huge untapped value for any company or organization.
Correct.
Yeah.
Ray Polk, he built a tool called Pulse. What he discovered was the project failing was the worst kept secret. Everybody on the project knew that it was doomed. It was not going to go well. But because we don't pay any attention to sentiment on projects, it was really difficult for other people to see, and then people got a shock and the whole thing came to an end. Imagine if you just used it for something like that. Like the reality is when you are on a project, there are 20 or 30 different message chats going at any point in time with multiple people, from stakeholders to the internal project. And there is so much sentiment that can be derived from that, just to say, are there risks now that people are talking about, or emerging risks that I cannot see, and the cost that we've got and the scope that we've got? Like, just being able to link those kinds of things or look through them for sentiment and understanding and emerging risks would be so valuable.
That would be pretty amazing. I'm sure there's a huge ethical dimension there too. Imagine companies
But why?
harnessing.
Why is it ethical? If I'm paying $1 billion to put a solution in place, and I say, you know what, I'm going to run all of your stuff, your messages and emails through AI, not because of you, because this is all work. This is work infrastructure, and this is, you come here and I pay you for 8 hours of the day. So why is it unethical? We already know that they have full access to our emails. We already know that all of the messages are available to IT and the leadership team.
It sounds like is
there an ethical dilemma?
Well, it sounds almost like you're foreshadowing that entire thing that came out recently from Anthropic with Claude, where they basically put it through that entire scenario where they did gave the AI access to person's emails, and then they also said, let it survive, or the business has to succeed or promote whatever. And the one guy that said, oh, well, they faked emails, and then the machine ended up coming back saying, I'm going to blackmail you. I'm going to tell everybody what you've done in your emails. I'm going to tell everybody if you don't do what I tell you to do. And
really?
Well, but yeah, and this was a simulated environment. But what they did was they simulated the environment where the employee was having an affair, and the AI came back in it because it had access to read all the emails, and it was able to say anything. And then the person said, "Well, I'm going to turn off the AI." So the AI wrote to him and said, "You're gonna get rid of that command, or I'm going to send a letter to every single director, all of your bosses, that you are having an affair." And that created the safeguard measure. But I think, Luke, what you're getting at, there's the ethical dilemma of, if you're going to give it access to everything, I suppose people could have microphones at a water cooler.
Isn't the ethical dilemma there that the human should not have been having an affair, and B, should not have been putting it on work email? Like, for me, the
100%. I'm not making a comment on it,
and not with the machine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No. But it does illustrate the
is...
example. But the thing that I heard when I heard that is, well, what would a person do if you were an assistant of that manager and you knew that was going on, and then they said, well, we're going to fire you without cause?
It's a Coldplay moment.
What would you
Andrew?
do?
Just sorry,
meme moment.
But also, if people knew that was happening, their emails and chats and stuff like that, they find another way to communicate, and that then becomes a little bit less useful.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that Project AI and the Pulse. So people stop responding properly to surveys if they know they're going to be used for a particular purpose. Sorry, David.
Yeah.
There you are. I just want to add another angle to your original point, Daniela, which is how I'm doing it. And I really hope that I'm not sounding like a cynical 30-year consultant here. often when I've been parachuted into a project to try and fix it, quite often I end up telling the executives something that their own staff have been telling them for 3 months, but because I'm in a nicer suit, they start to listen, right? So
Correct.
maybe the eight have a similar thing. So maybe, there's probably project managers and people in the project teams that, oh, this is going west in a really large way. But if AI start to tell, oh, all of a sudden it's an algorithm and it's artificial intelligence, we better listen to that. So I just wonder if there's a factor where, just having another voice would actually help organizations, and, a voice that's considered to be unbiased, such,
I wonder as
would
well
actually
in
help.
those, I wonder as well in those situations if an AI would be able to give us alternative methods. Because what I tend to find with those kinds of projects is, yes, you go in, everyone's fully aware of the problems, but they feel powerless to be able to do anything about it, whether it be because they don't have executive support, whether it be that the technology doesn't support what they want to do and nobody wants to rip off the Band-Aid, whether it be that the requirements have now well exceeded what they originally estimated, lots of different reasons. But I wonder now whether AI looking across all of the data will help us see avenues to fix, improve, redirect, all those kinds of things that sometimes as a human, when you're overwhelmed by something that's going on, it's very difficult to stand back from it and be able to say, there are alternatives. I do have choices. These are the different avenues that I could potentially move down to fix this. And that's what I hope, by the sheer nature of the fact that I can't absorb everything. And I also have an emotional layer that inhibits me, that, AI will give us some support there. Does that make sense?
It does. And it also brings up, I guess, to me, it brings up the old adage, don't just come to me with problems, come to me with solutions as well, right? So, so we don't just want the AI to tell us the problem. As you said, there's more than likely many people know the problem, but it's like, so what are some options that we can explore to get ourselves out of this situation?
Correct.
I don't know that AI is there yet. It may be, and in certain circumstances, no doubt it is. But I think that's a critical factor too.
And that's a good opportunity, David, because I know dealing with AI, even with LLMs today, part of the idea is everybody says, oh, well, summarize this for me or tell me how my day was if you're using one of the transcription notices. But one of the things that a lot of the companies do that promote these things is say, make the next question, what can I do better? Or give me 3 options, as opposed to give me the answer. Give me 3 options and lay out the possibilities for each one.
Yeah. Lay out the potential decisions that I could make and what are the risks that come with each of them. If you gave me 3 of those options and I was able to clearly articulate them and take them to the right leadership team meeting, maybe we could progress forward. But and the only reason why I bring this up is because when I have to do that by hand, and this comes back to the concept of productivity, when I need to do that by hand in the first instance, sometimes I can waste many cycles just doing the research that's required. I've got to get the scoping team to go back and speak to the stakeholders again about scope. I've got to re-estimate the whole thing. And when a sponsor says to me, oh, can you re-estimate 3 different options? It's like, that's going to take me weeks. And that means that I am still running the project potentially off course, because we now recognize we need to divert at some point in time. So I'm still working on an old solution. Everyone's still running at it. And I've wasted a month trying to collect the data that I need in order to assess what the different options are. Being able to reduce that time frame down, even if it was by a week, because knowing that when you're asking AI for answers, you don't get it on the first go. You have to ask multiple questions and go down the rabbit holes, do you know what I mean, before you get to that point. But even just having support there to be able to reduce that timeline would be fantastic. Don't you think?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I remember previous role, we'd get like a 300-page submission from a department, and I'd have to my team would turn it into a 2-page brief to a premier with the decision there and the risks. And if we're able to have something that is able to do that a lot quicker, then we're able to have more time in actually challenging what's in that 300-page submission and going, are we being told the right things? Where should we actually challenge this? How do we improve our decision making, the options that we're putting forward? Have we got the risks right? Have we got the quantification of those risks right?
Things are just think about any opportunity. You basically can walk outside and find any opportunity. It's kind of like when people said, oh, well, we'll have a robot vacuum, or you can have a robot to do various things. Just look outside and you could probably find 10 different opportunities for it. So especially in business, because we were just talking about how many times you bring an intern, do you bring a tool, the type of places where you're using it. And I think that ends up being one of the key things that people just need to figure out what they want the AI to. Do they just want it to be, as you were talking about, just doing a summary of documents, or just doing certain things, therefore it's a tool? Do you want it to help you, or do you want it to do something more? And I think that's where, 20 million opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I did see something the other day about the best jobs in the AI world, and they were talking about digger operators and really manual type things like that. And absolutely right. We're going to need to dig up all the lithium to power our electric future and what else have you. So there's a sense of truth in that. But again, I don't think that's changed very much. It's now lithium. It used to be coal. It used to be other things. I don't think it's changed that much. I guess, one comment that I would make is that, by telling everyone that you need to go to university, then by going to university, you're the average. Right. So that's the other problem too. So, and I say that as someone who didn't go to university. So, so that's I think that's the other problem is that, by telling everyone to get an advantage, you need to go to university, the advantage goes away.
I think the idea, though, is that idea of continual learning is the key thing that has to be driven home, because so many people go to university or to whatever school, even trade school, and they say, this is the way I learned, and they refuse to see it any other way. And you mentioned doctors. There are doctors that do exactly the same thing. And there are lots of different stories of people that just don't want to learn or change any particular way, even when something new comes along. So I think it's a matter of maybe the education system, to your point, Ryan, is really about maybe trying to encourage people to embrace continuous learning rather than just say, here's your degree, or here's what you wanted to do, and not. Because eventually they may figure out a way of getting a robot to do all of the mining of lithium and so forth without causing continental drift or anything else that would possibly destroy it and make sure everybody goes, I never wanted to do that in the first place.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Powering ProjeX. As we close out, I wanted to say one huge last thank you to Ryan, David, Andrew, and Luke for joining me and their expert insights. And thank you to all of our faithful listeners for tuning into this episode of Powering ProjeX. If you found value in today's episode, please do subscribe, share it with your friends and your community of project professionals, and leave me a review. Your engagement helps me reach more people just like you who may benefit from the community, and also to improve what we are doing here at Powering ProjeX. Remember, I cannot improve without your feedback, so feel free to send it through. But don't stop there. Engage with us. Share your challenges, your successes, and let me know which skills, techniques, AIs that you'd like us to talk about, and help me discover the voices and the stories that will benefit our entire community. If you have a guest suggestion, comment below or email me at poweringprojects@gmail.com. Join us next month for AI Series Episode 2 as we continue the discussion. Until then, keep innovating. See you later. I'm DK, signing out. The content provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional, legal, or financial advice. The opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of any affiliated organisations or sponsors. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information on project management methodologies and related topics, no guarantee is made regarding the completeness, accuracy, or applicability of the content to your specific circumstances. Listeners are encouraged to consult with qualified professionals before making decisions based on the information shared in this podcast. The hosts, guests, and producers are not liable for any losses, damages, or outcomes resulting from the use of this podcast's content. By listening to this podcast, you agree to assume all risks associated with the application of the information provided. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you'll find value in our discussions.